The recovery room smelled like antiseptic and something faintly plastic, the kind of smell that gets into your lungs and stays there. I came out of the anesthesia slowly, in pieces, the way you surface from a very deep, very dark water. The first thing I heard was a machine beeping somewhere to my left. The second thing I heard was my own voice asking for Joel. A nurse told me he was just down the hall with the baby. She's doing well, she said, and that word, well, landed on me like the first solid thing I'd touched in hours. Our daughter, 7 weeks early and already fighting. I lay there for a long time, too tired to move, too relieved to cry. The ceiling of the recovery room had a water stain in the shape of something I couldn't name. I stared at it while the feeling came back to my legs in slow, uncomfortable waves. Then I remembered the watch. My grandfather had worn it every day for 30 years. A 1970 Omega Seamaster, slim and simple, with a brushed steel case and a worn leather strap he'd replaced 3 times over the years. When I was small, maybe 5 or 6, I used to sit beside him at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings and he'd let me wind it. Just a few turns, just enough to feel the tiny click of the mechanism catching. He called it our Sunday ritual. I called it the best part of the week. He left it to me specifically. To my granddaughter Vera, who knows how to listen to the things that matter. His words, not mine. I had them memorized. The watch had been appraised at $13,500, but I would not have sold it for 10 times that. I wore it on special occasions, my convocation from teachers' college, the day my first contract came through, the evening Joel proposed on the back porch of his parents' place in Ancaster, with the fireflies just starting up in the garden. I hadn't been wearing it the day I was rushed into emergency surgery. It had been sitting in my bedside drawer at home. But I had asked Joel to bring it to the hospital once we knew the baby was stable. I'd asked him to bring it, so I could have something of my grandfather's close to me, while our daughter was in the NICU. He'd brought it, and he'd given it to my mother for safekeeping, while he was with me in recovery. I pressed the call button and asked the nurse about my personal belongings. She found the bag quickly, a standard beige hospital bag with my name on a sticker inside, my rings, my phone, my lip balm, a hair elastic, the granola bar I'd shoved into my purse on the way to the hospital before everything went sideways. No watch. I told myself it was fine, my mother had it, that made sense. I'd ask her when she came by. She came that afternoon, while Joel was back in the NICU with the neonatologist. She brought Tim Hortons, 2 large steep teas, because she knew the hospital coffee was terrible, and because small kindnesses had always been my mother's way of avoiding larger conversations. She set mine on the bedside table and looked at the window instead of at me, and I noticed it immediately, because my mother has never once in her life been shy about eye contact. Mom, I said, can I have the watch back? I want to keep it in the room. She set her own tea down with both hands. Sweetheart, that one word, and the tone of it, told me everything before she said another thing. You've just had major surgery. You've got enough to focus on right now. Mom, the watch, where is it? The pause that followed lasted exactly long enough for me to understand that whatever she was about to say was going to change something permanently. There were some things we needed to sort out, she said. Your father and I have been stretched very thin this year, and Kieran's situation. Don't. My voice came out flat. Don't tell me it was for Kieran. She pressed her lips together and looked at her hands. Kieran is my younger brother. He's 24, he lives in Mississauga, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the project our family poured itself into. He's not a bad person. I want to be clear about that, because this story is not about hating my brother. He is simply a person who was raised to believe that his needs were urgent, and mine were flexible, and who never had much reason to test that assumption. For the past year, Kieran had been trying to buy his first condo. You don't need me to tell you what the GTA real estate market looks like. My parents had been anxious about it the way they were always anxious about Kieran's things. Loudly, constantly, treating it like a family crisis that required everyone's full attention. They'd already given him money toward his RRSP home buyer's plan contribution. They'd paid to have a real estate lawyer review 2 separate purchase agreements that had fallen through. And apparently, when a unit in Scarborough finally came through, and the numbers were still short, they had looked around for what else they could give him. We're going to pay you back, my mother said. As soon as the closing goes through, Kieran will. You sold it. I could hear my own heartbeat. You sold Grandpa's watch while I was in surgery, while my daughter was in the NICU. You sold his watch. It was sitting in a bag, she said. And I don't think she understood how that sentence sounded until after it left her mouth. I asked her to leave. Joel came back an hour later with a photo on his phone, a blurry NICU snapshot of our daughter, with a tiny pink hat pulled over her ears and a breathing monitor taped to her chest. He was trying to make me smile. He looked at my face and set the phone down. What happened? I showed him my bare wrist. He didn't move for a long moment. How long ago did she leave? Not confusion, not disbelief. Just how much time has passed and how do we fix this? That is the kind of man Joel is. And that night, in a hospital room with our daughter 40 meters away, and a blood pressure cuff tightening around my arm every 20 minutes, I was grateful for it in a way I don't have adequate words for. I want to tell you something about my family before I go further, because the watch was not the beginning of this. It was just the first time I could see the whole shape of it clearly, all at once, from the outside. When I was 17, I won a regional writing award. Nothing enormous, but real work I had put real effort into. My parents came to the ceremony. My father slept through the reading of my piece and woke up convinced he hadn't missed anything. My mother left before the reception to pick up Kieran from a hockey tournament in Barrie because his ride had canceled. There is a photo from that night of me holding the certificate alone, with 2 empty chairs on either side. When I graduated from Teachers College and landed my first long-term occasional contract in Hamilton, which anyone who has navigated Ontario supply teaching will tell you is not a small thing to get, my father's first response was to ask if I could put in a word at the school board for Kieran, who had been considering maybe becoming an educational assistant someday. I did put in a word. Kieran never followed up on it. I had learned, over 22 years of being their daughter, to need very little out loud. I paid my own way through university, on a combination of OSAP and part-time shifts at a grocery store. I didn't ask them to co-sign my car loan. I didn't ask them to help with first and last on my apartment in Hamilton. I managed, because managing was what I did. And, somewhere along the way, manages on her own had quietly become shorthand for, doesn't need to be considered. Joel found the pawn receipt 4 days after I was discharged, tucked into the inside pocket of my father's everyday jacket, the one he wears for errands and grocery runs, and apparently for dropping heirlooms at consignment shops. My father is not a careful man when it comes to hiding evidence of his own decisions. He didn't tell me right away. He showed up at our house, made me tea, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and then said, very carefully, that he needed to take a drive and he'd explain when he got back. He was gone for nearly 3 hours. When he returned, his eyes were tired and his jaw was set in that way it gets when he's been carrying something in silence, and he sat back down and said, "The watch is still there. They haven't moved it yet. I need you to trust me for 48 hours. I trusted him. I had always trusted him. What I didn't know was that Joel had driven to the consignment shop in Mississauga, a place called Hartley's, which had been there 30 years and specialized in estate jewelry and vintage pieces, and had described the watch in enough detail that the man behind the counter had nodded slowly and said, unprompted, "Family piece, you can always tell." The shop held items for 30 days before moving them to sale. Joel had arrived with 9 days to spare. He paid the redemption price out of our joint savings account, the one we had been building slowly and carefully toward our own home purchase, a goal we were already quietly postponing, because the NICU bills were eating into our cushion in ways neither of us had planned for. He didn't tell me any of this until the watch was already home. Meanwhile, I had started writing things down. I called my friend Yvonne, who had been a paralegal for 6 years and who had the particular gift of listening to something outrageous and responding with complete, useful calm. We met at her kitchen table in Stony Creek, and I laid it out, the watch, the receipt, the timing, 22 years of context, and she stirred her coffee and was quiet for a moment. In Ontario, she said, personal property bequeathed to you specifically is yours. It doesn't matter that they're your parents. Taking it and selling it without your consent is conversion. In plain language, that's theft. She paused. I'm not telling you what to do with that. I'm telling you that you have options, and you should understand them. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't want to destroy my family. I didn't want a police report with my father's name on it. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was just to be seen. To matter the same amount as Kieran. Not more, just the same. But I had finally stopped believing that would happen on its own, without something forcing it into the light. So Yvonne helped me put something together. Not a lawsuit, a letter. Clear and factual and impossible to ignore. Kieran had his housewarming 2 weeks later. His condo was on the 14th floor of a new build in Scarborough, and my parents had organized the whole thing. Catered appetizers, a cheese board that cost more than my first month's rent in Hamilton, a city skyline view that probably looked better in the listing than in person, and a playlist running through a Bluetooth speaker in the corner. I RSVP'd yes. I bought Kieran a gift, a good one. A custom print of the neighborhood we'd grown up in, framed, because whatever was happening between me and our parents had never actually been about him. I wore my grandfather's watch on my wrist, where it belonged. Yvonne helped me arrange for a document package to be couriered to my parents' Oakville address on the evening of the party. Timed, not accidentally, to arrive around 8 o'clock, when the gathering would be in full swing and my parents would be at their most comfortable. Inside, the watch's original appraisal certificate, a copy of the Hartley's receipt dated and time-stamped, and a formal letter requesting restitution of the assessed value, written in language that was calm and precise and left no room for creative interpretation. My father answered his phone in the middle of a conversation near the balcony door. I watched his expression change from across the room, from easy, party host pleasantness to something cloudier, something that pulled at the corners of his eyes. He excused himself and moved toward the hallway, and my mother followed the way she always followed when she could sense something was wrong. My father's older brother, Uncle Gareth, had been standing near the entryway most of the evening. Uncle Gareth spent 31 years as a federal civil servant and can identify letterhead from 15 feet away, like it's a professional reflex. He craned slightly as my father's hands moved and said, genuinely puzzled, "The way you are when you recognize something completely out of context. Is that from Hartley's, the consignment place on Ontario?" He looked around at no one in particular. Did someone bring in an estate piece? The shift in the room was quiet and immediate. The way a party changes shape when something real surfaces through the social noise. My mother said too quickly, "It's nothing. We'll sort it out later." Uncle Gareth looked at me, looked at the watch on my wrist, looked back at my father's face. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. My parents brought me into the kitchen, away from the other guests. Though the kitchen in a 400-square-foot condo only takes you so far from the living room. "You could have come to us directly," my mother said, her voice low and controlled and furious beneath the surface. "You didn't have to involve anyone. You didn't have to do this here, tonight." "I have been coming to you directly my entire life," I said. "I've been managing and adjusting and making myself smaller, so there'd always be room for whatever Kieran needed. I came to you directly in the hospital, and you told me you'd pay it back eventually, and I was too exhausted from surgery to fight. I'm not too exhausted anymore." My father was quiet. That silence, from him, was how I knew this version of the conversation was going to be different from every other one we'd ever had. Kieran appeared in the doorway of his own kitchen then, still in his good blazer, his face uncertain in a way I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. He looked at the watch on my wrist for a long moment. "I noticed it was gone," he said, "from the box in Mom's china cabinet. Grandpa's watch. It wasn't there anymore, and I asked about it, and Mom said there was nothing to worry about." He stopped. "I should have pushed harder. I should have called you, Vera. I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions and I didn't." It wasn't everything I might have hoped to hear from him. But it was honest, and from Kieran, honesty had always cost something. My father spoke next, quietly, looking at the kitchen counter rather than at me. "I didn't think about what it meant to you," he said. "I saw a number and a problem to solve, and I didn't think about what I was actually taking. That was wrong. It was wrong. And I should have asked you, and I'm sorry." He said it the way people say things they mean, but have never had to practice saying, a little awkward, a little late, completely real. My mother's apology came 3 days later, by text. It had more qualifications in it than my father's. More "you have to understand the position we were in," more "we were trying to help your brother." But it was there. I accepted it for what it was. People show remorse the way they're capable of showing it, not always the way you need them to. Healing isn't one conversation, it's a long series of smaller choices made in the same direction, over and over, until a new pattern forms. Joel and I set a wedding date 6 weeks after the housewarming. Something small, next September, at a vineyard in the Niagara region, where his family has a connection to a venue that overlooks the escarpment. I said yes before he finished the sentence. My daughter is 4 months old now and completely unbothered by the drama she inadvertently set in motion by arriving early. She is loud and opinionated and holds on to things with a grip that surprises everyone who tries to take them from her. I have decided to take that as a sign. I wind the watch on Sunday mornings now, the same way my grandfather taught me. Just a few turns, just enough to feel the mechanism catch. Some things are built to survive, not because they're protected from everything that could break them, but because someone who loves them keeps showing up to take care of them. That's what I've decided to do with my family. Not because they've fully earned it yet, but because I've decided who I want to be in this story going forward. Present, no longer invisible, available but no longer waiting to be chosen. I am not the backup plan, I never was. It just took 32 years, one very stubborn daughter, and a watch that found its way home, to make sure everyone finally understood that.